Good afternoon, dear students. In the previous lecture, we discussed about natural disasters, and today we'll discuss in detail about floods, which is also a kind of natural disaster. So, let's start our today's lecture. Flooding is a temporary overflow of water onto land that is normally dry. The floods may result from rain, snow, coastal storms, storm surges, and also overflows from dams and other water systems. Sometimes flood may develop very slowly. On the other hand, sometimes they occur very quickly. The examples are flash floods that come without any warning. The floods may cause outages, disrupt transportation system, they may damage buildings and create landslides. So these are all the disruptions or disturbances which can be created whenever flood occurs in any area. If we talk about the types of floods, normally there are three common types. The first out of which is flash floods that are caused by the rapid and excessive rainfall that raises water heights quickly, and in such cases rivers, streams, channels or roads may be overtaken. Another type is river floods, which is caused when consistent rain or snow melt forces a river to exceed its capacity. And the last type of flood is known as coastal floods. Coastal floods are caused by the storm surges associated with tropical cyclones and tsunamis. Now, talking about the impacts of flood, the floods can have medium and long term health impacts, including water and vector borne diseases such as cholera, typhoid, and malaria, etc. The floods may also result into injuries from evacuations and disaster cleanup processes. The floods may also cause chemical hazards, and most commonly, floods may result into mental health effects associated with the emergency situations. Because whenever flood occur to any area, many times uh, it happens that we uh, lose our near and dear ones, our property, etc., and that creates a mental disturbance uh, in the affected person's life. The floods may also result into disrupted health systems, facilities and services, leaving communities without access to health care, damaged basic infrastructure that is very common in the flood prone areas, such as food and water supplies and safe shelter. So these are some of the common impacts of a flood. Now, if we look back in the history, year 1998 was considered as a year of floods. In this year, one of the nature's most turbulent flood was caused uh, in the North America, South America, Asia, and Europe. Initially, the El Nino and La Nino effects were thought to be responsible for these floods, and scientists believe that these factors combined with the global warming caused by pollution and made the disasters more severe. El Nino and La Nino effects resulted into the flood in the North and South America, Asia, and Europe. But along with this, the global warming that resulted into uh, greater evaporation from the surface water bodies, and it caused excessive rainfall. Along with this, the pollution also uh, was responsible for this flood. The usually deforestation and global warming are considered as two of the main man-made causes for the flood. And in this flood, lot of lives were lost, and there was a huge damage to the property. This picture shows the situation when the flood occurred in 1998 in USA. Now, if we talk about some key facts about floods in India, the India is highly vulnerable to floods. Out of the total geographical area of near about 329 million hectares, Approximately 40 million hectare is flood prone. The average annual flood damage in last 10-year period from 1996 to 2005 was estimated near about 4,745 crores in India. The average every year 75 lakh hectares of the land is affected due to flood in India. Uh, Near about 600 lives were lost, and the damage caused to crops, houses, and public utilities due to flood is near about 1,800 crores. The maximum number of lives, that was 11,316, was lost in year 1977 in India due to flood. So this data clearly reflects that how devastating effects could be seen out of the floods in any area, especially in India. Now, talking about the reasons for the heavy floods in India, the reasons may include increase in the population. Because of that, deforestation is very commonly seen across the different parts of India, and that is one of the reasons of the flood. Rapid urbanization is also responsible for heavy floods. Growing developmental and economic activities in the floodplains, because whenever developmental and economic activities will be taken up in the floodplains, then it will result into uh, nudation of that area. The snow melt, water, as well as the rainwater easily escapes through such areas and finally gets converted in the form of flood in the river uh, course. The another reason of heavy flood in India could be global warming. So these are some of the reasons which may bring floods in most part of the world, including India. Now we'll talk about that. What are the do's and don'ts uh, before a flood, during a flood condition, and after the flood? So, first of all, what to do before a flood? Uh, Before the flood, we have to prepare ourselves by avoiding buildings in flood prone areas unless we elevate and reinforce our homes. Elevate the furnace, water heaters, and electric panels if prone to the flooding. And we should install check valves in the sewer traps to prevent flood water from backing up into the drains of our homes. So check valves will stop back entry of flood water into our houses. The another task that we should do, that we should contact community officials to find out if they are planning to construct a barriers such as levees, beams, and flood walls to stop flood water from entering the homes in our area. And we can also seal the walls in our basement with waterproofing compounds to avoid the seepage. So these are the precautions which we should take if we are living in a flood prone area. Now, if a flood is likely to hit our area, what we should do? First of all, we should listen to the radio, television, or any kind of communication for update in the information. Then we should be aware that flash flooding can occur. If there is any possibility of flash flood, we should immediately move to the higher grounds. And at that time, we should not wait for the instructions to move. And we should be aware of streams, drainage channels, canyons, and other areas known to the flood suddenly. Flash floods can occur in these areas with or without such typical warnings as rain clouds or heavy rain. So, if we must prepare to evacuate, we should secure our home. If we have time, we should bring in outdoor furniture, move essential items to an upper floor, turn off utilities at the main switches or valves if instructed to do so. We should disconnect electrical appliances. We should not touch electrical equipment if we are wet or standing in water. So these are some of the uh, precautionary advisories that we should follow if we are uh, in a flood prone area. So these are do's and don'ts. So if we have to leave our houses, we should remember these evacuation tips. First, we should not walk through the moving water. 6 inches of moving water can make us fall. If we have to walk in water, then we should walk where the water is not moving. We should use a stick to check the firmness of the ground in front of us. Another thing that we should do, that we should not drive into flooded areas. If floodwaters rise around our car, abandon the car and move to the higher ground if we can do so safely. We and our vehicles can be quickly swept away. So uh, these things also we should remember as evacuation tips. Now we'll talk about how can we manage floods. So flood management measures can be classified as structural measures and non-structural measures. So these are two methods or ways through which we may manage the floods. Talking about structural measures, in this approach, physical structures are used to prevent the floodwaters from reaching potential damage regions. The main structural measures are as follows. Uh, First, embankments, flood walls, and flood levees. In this slide, also, you can see through the picture the elevated area of uh, this surface water body is known as embankment. So we can also control floods by constructing dams and reservoirs uh, that may hold excess of water during the peak rainy season. Another way is by construction of natural detention basins, then by channel improvement, drainage improvement, diversion of flood water, catchment area treatment, or afforestation in the catchment area, or by anti-erosion works. So by using all these methods or structural measures, we can manage the floods by structural means. Now, talking about how we can manage floods by non-structural methods or ways. The non-structural measures strive to keep the people away from the floodwater. Following are the main non-structural measures uh, that are uh, by using flood forecasting and warning. If proper warning and forecasting system is established to the flood prone areas, then people may be informed well in advance a flood reaches to that area, and all the necessary evacuations can be made before time. The another method is by flood hazard zoning, then by flood proofing, regulation of reservoirs, and flood insurance. These are some non-structural measures through which we can manage floods. In this table also you can see that flood hazard classifications are made as uh, or classified or categorized as very low, low, moderate, high, or very high. If the number of times in a years the flood was subjected to the flood inundation during 1998 to 2007, if in this if in between these 9 years the flood occurred at any place between 1 to 2 times, then that area is classified as having very low flood hazard. If this number is 3 to 4 times in this period, if flood occurs between 3 to 4 times between 1998 to 2007, then that area is classified as low flood hazard. Then if this number increases to 5 to 6 times, then moderate. If it is 7 to 8 times between 1998 to 2007, then that area is considered as high flood hazard area. And if the number exceeds 9 to 10 times, means almost every year uh, flood was seen to that area or flood occurred to that area, then that area is considered as very high flood hazard area or zone. Towards non-structural flood management measures, in India, the Central Water Commission, that is CWC, has established flood forecasting system in India. comprising of 175 stations on all major rivers in the country, and is implementing the scheme for its modernization and expansion. So these are some of the steps which has been initiated by central and state government of India for controlling and managing the floods in our country. Now another method of that is non-structural method for flood management is use of remote sensing. The potential use of remote sensing technology for flood disaster management can be as follows. The remote sensing can help us in mapping and monitoring the flood inundation by assessment of rapid damage to the flooded area, by monitoring and mapping of flood control works and changes in the river course, and identification of river bank erosion, identification of chronic flood prone areas, improvement in the flood forecasting and warning models. So remote sensing uh, uses the satellite images of the area, that is flooded or that is flood prone, and these images are taken up in a very short uh, duration for a continuous period. So without physically reaching to that place, we may get all the information related to the flood inundation, the damage that has been caused to that area, and uh, the flood control works, or if there is any change in the river course line, then if at any place the river bank has uh, been subjected to erosion, what is the magnitude of that erosion, then uh, identification of the chronic flood prone areas, and flood forecasting and warning models. By using all these things, we can take help of remote sensing for flood management. Now we'll talk about the use of remote sensing uh, by IRS satellite images uh, in the state of Assam in India, and these two pictures shows the pre-flooded and flooded situation in the Assam state, and the pictures were taken up by the satellite, that is IRS satellite. And in this picture you may see that different colors are showing up. The blue color indicates the water, while the red color indicates vegetation in that area, and white color indicates the cloud cover in these images. So if you compare between the pre-flood situation and the flood situation, you may see that the blue color area has been expanded because the flood has uh, increased the water area after the flooded condition in Assam. So these pictures can help us understanding the exact situation uh, that has happened to the flood prone areas or flooded areas, and by knowing the exact magnitude of the uh, flood, we may plan up our strategy for post disaster management activities. So this was an example that how we can use the remote sensing for the flood management. So that was all about today, and in the next lecture we'll discuss about another natural disaster, probably earthquakes. So that was all about today. So take care. Thank you.